Great to have you over here once again.
Hello?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, your voice is थोड़ा आवाज गूंज रहा है थोड़ा सा हेडफोन ठीक कर लो
गूंज रहा है क्या? अभी ठीक है?
हाँ अब ठीक है
Okay.
या बढ़िया great so how many people do we have here 45 50 let's reach 50 and then I'll start
Okay.
okay. yeah no we can start it's okay धीरे धीरे शुरू करते हैं yeah you're starting comments and then we begin before you begin, just a minute. We'll not be taking requests for the initial part. You know, we have a lot of topics to cover today, and just it's more about the supply chain and economics and how they are going to impact the whole thing. So Himja, we had a discussion over in the afternoon today, and we decided to have this space so that we can, discuss the geopolitical impact, first order, second order, third order, and all that stuff. So, अगर आप लोगों को थोड़ा सा, if it's possible, just hold on for a while. Okay, we'll take mic at the fag end. Just a very short space of 1 hour, not more than that. Anyways, Himja, start, please.
Good evening.
Good evening. Your voice again, थोड़ा सा सब करो आवाज ज़्यादा आ रहा है.
अभी ठीक है?
नहीं गूंज रहा है काफी गूंज रहा है.
अभी ठीक है? Now, is it okay?
Yeah, better.
Okay.
Start.
All right. So, good evening. Happy to be here. Lots of interesting things happening in the world, not in a very good way. The impacts of it are going to stay with us for a very, very long time. So, Navroop and I were discussing a couple of things today afternoon, and I have been also following the news, and we've been seeing that there is a fair amount of disinformation that has been.
We lost you. Hello. Just a second. Can anyone hear her? Oh my God. Just hold on a second. Yeah. Finally, you're back. We missed you. I think some error.
Yeah, now? Is
Yeah,
it
better.
okay?
Yeah, please continue.
Okay, fine. So again, sorry for the interruption. So as I was saying that in the last couple of weeks we've been following, I think now we are into the war we've crossed a month. So a lot of the initial actions, reactions, we have seen them. We have a tentative idea of how much damage Iran is capable of creating and continues to create. So where we are standing at today, in the last few days, we're also seeing a lot of disinformation by a lot of other analysts around. when in Navroop, in my opinion, we've been witnessing that a lot of people are missing the woods for the trees. So they are catching on to topics that are really not so important. Now, a lot of people are saying, for example, that this is like the 1973 energy crisis when there was a blockade, or some people are saying the supply chain reaction is similar to COVID, or economically the impact is like the 2008 financial crisis. But somehow, this time, the kind of situation that we are seeing, considering that it is a combination of energy security, which impacts oil and gas globally, and the amount of damage to infrastructure that has taken place, along with the fact that the Hormuz is also responsible for shipping a significant amount of fertilizer. The other aspect being that a lot of the countries that are exporters, not exporters of energy, they are also exporters of fertilizer. So we are looking at food. So we are looking at food security. We are looking at energy security. These are two very, very important components for any country. The third component that becomes very important apart from the economy is obviously defense. This time around, we have seen the entire meaning of defense for countries change, because the GCC always felt that it was protected because of the American security umbrella. Now, clearly, the current situation has not been able to insulate them. In fact, they have been targeted because of the American security umbrella. And and we have also seen America, withdraw their defense systems, their missile protection systems from South Korea, transfer them to the Middle East. So we've seen a lot of events which are going to make countries question their defense architecture. Apart from this being the absolute immediate effect and the crazy high oil prices, and we are already looking at numbers in the range of 110 to 120, and there is clearly no end. There is no clear end in sight as of today. Along with the fact that a fair amount of energy architecture in the ecosystem, a certain percentage of it has been destroyed, which means this is going to take a while before it comes back on the market. So currently, we're in a situation where countries are doing their best to secure what is available. But at some point, whatever is available is not going to be available. And as far as the new production is concerned, that is going to be A, delayed, B, it is going to be significantly reduced, and it's going to have a lot of takers. So that is when things start going really crazy. If 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 we think what we are seeing today is crazy, what's going to come is even crazier. And we are not even talking about all the countries trying to sell their gold, trying to sell U.S. treasuries because of the clear liquidity problem that is there globally. So I think it's just a lot of things. So I think every single day, as someone rightly said, we are not just seeing the apparent problems, but we are seeing the secondary and the tertiary effects of what this war, the more it prolongs, where we are going to see the impacts, and none of them are remotely any good. I don't know, Navroop. Do you want to start talking topic specific now?
Yeah, let's begin with the first order effects.
Yeah,
The biggest effect of this war is going to be on the energy supply chains.
yeah,
And one of the biggest impacts is going to be oil and gas, obviously, because that is the critical industry which fires the whole world. And interestingly, GCC, that is the Gulf countries, have been the hub of the oil and gas industry. Qatar alone produced 30% of the world gas, Saudi Arabia, Iran, you had the Paz gas field, you had all these countries, virtually running oiling the whole economy, the
yeah.
global
And
economy. Yeah.
and before we talk about what happened when the war started, just a little before the war started, we saw the United States take over the Venezuelan oil reserves, which are the largest in the world.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
so
Yeah.
this becomes relevant when we talk about the current oil supply chain, that is pre-war, as in pre-February 28th, and what is the emerging alternate supply chain, which is basically US led. So when you talk about supply chains, talk about both.
Correct, absolutely. So the thing is that in this you have the Qataris which lost nearly because of the Ras Lafan their gas pipeline which was hit by Iranian drones and missiles after Israel's attack on South Pass. So they lost 17% of the gas. They say it will take 3 to 5 years to get it back to recovered, and approximately it will cost $26 billion. And that's a huge, and this is, we are declaring a force majeure. We can't provide gas to Belgium, Italy, Australia, and even to South Korea. And that created, uh, uh, you know, you know, the fall in supply. The immediate beneficiaries of these gas plants going off, the biggest gas LNG plant in the world, that's one of the biggest is in Qatar, is America. Because if the Gulf countries lose out on oil and gas supply chains due to the plants getting damaged or their Hormuz getting blocked, which is currently it is soft blocked. It is still open. It is still functioning, but it is blocked in a technical sense for a couple of countries, right? Then the biggest beneficiaries are going to be US, which supplies the largest LNG to the world. Then comes Canada, which becomes the second largest supplier of LNG reserves, okay, technically, in the Americas. Then you have Argentina, which has a huge shale gas reserve discovered a few years back. And then you have Brazil. Interestingly, countries like India, Canada, India has signed up with US LNG, Argentina for LPG, Brazil for oil, and these countries are now supplying oil and gas to various other, specifically countries in Asia, specifically who are going to the biggest, because Asia was one of the big Asian countries with the biggest importers from oil and gas from the Strait of Hormuz. It wasn't the Americas which were there. The first order effect is obviously going to come on the Asian countries. And in among the Asian countries, the biggest hit, is going to come on South Korea and Japan. And South Korea and Japan, because they used to import 90% of the LNG from Qatar, and that puts them in a different league altogether. Because India, is getting LNG from US. India is also getting LNG from Russia. So far, so that we even got one LPG tanker from Iran. So that's a very and the trade between India and Iran is happening between in the local currencies, or let's say in yuan or dirhams. It is a ruble. It is not happening in dollars, by the way. Yeah.
And Reliance is looking at opening a refinery in America, and
Yep.
a lot of other refineries are also tweaking their systems to be able to refine Venezuelan. So also what happens is that you are looking at a long-term shift, because once once countries refine, or they sort of tweak their architecture, at some point, whenever the Middle Eastern energy ecosystem starts becoming functional like old times, they may realize that a completely different system has already been created, it's been set in place. Because see, the GCC, the whole reason they were efficient energy suppliers to Asia is mainly two reasons. One, they were economical and they were reliable. These were the two bases on basis of which they built their reputation. Now, the minute there is going to be sort of a gap there, and there is a new system which comes into place, by the time the old system becomes efficient again, the takers change. It loses its leverage. A lot of things happen to change. And clearly here, US ends up being a significant beneficiary. I believe in Brazil, we also have a reciprocal system. We are refining for them, right? If I'm
Yep.
not
Yep.
wrong. Yeah.
Yep. 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 Correct. And very interesting, India. The Americans have lifted, and this is another part of the oil and gas story. Americans have lifted sanctions against seaborne crude of Russia. They have lifted sanctions on seaborne crude of Iran. So now, let's say for Iran, so first start with Iran because that's the hot topic today. Now, Iran is virtually exporting 150 million barrels per day from Kharg Island. The tankers are loading and they're going. And 90% of that oil is going towards China. It is being settled in yuan, most likely, because they have a yuan agreement. And if you convert to the current market price at which it is going to China, that's approximately come up to Iran has already earned in the month $3 to $4 billion. This excludes what the Qataris have allegedly given them of $6 billion. So Iran's total budget of annual budget is $10 billion, and within 1 month it has already earned $10 billion. Using this budget, they can obviously fund the war against America itself. So America is technically funding Iran for a war against itself. That's a hilarious loop, which at this minute is going and going on, and this is going on because they have to stabilize the oil prices, which they did not imagine this would happen.
But if oil remains at these levels, which is actually very, very dangerous for the world, but at these levels, there is a far amount of more oil that is to be discovered, which so far was not being discovered because the levels were not sustainable. If oil remains at these levels, a lot of that discovery starts suddenly becoming viable.
One more thing I found out today, and just as we were talking, the Americans have done a very interesting thing today. There were diesel LNG tankers which were going on from what do you say, from US to Europe, and these are Allied, Mindriva Vaso, and Grand A2. They were all loaded in US and were initially bound for Europe, specifically Amsterdam and Gibraltar, and all of them in the midway stopped. And the Americans have threatened the Europeans that you either, first they threatened that you ratify the $450 billion trade deal, or else we are not sending you LNG. The Europeans obviously got angry, and you saw the reactions today with the France said, okay, we'll discuss, what happened today. And then finally, where are those tankers going? They're going down towards Africa. Are they heading towards India? We still do not know, right? This is another facet of the energy war which have begun, and the Americans have started blackmailing Europe. You cannot get energy from Russia, you cannot get energy from Qatar, so you are dependent upon us. Decide where you want to go. And there begins another game of the hegemon, because now Americans have their hegemony of the LNG. So this is another facet. Now coming to Russia. Now, they have also reduced the Russian crude. I mean, they've allowed the Russian crude to go. So that India is lapping up 7 tankers, 8 tankers, Russian crude is going. Very interestingly, Russia also, broke the blockade, I think, which is a very least covered news in the, in the market or in the coverage. That Cuba blockade with a submarine and a frigate. And that by itself is a huge signal in America's backyard. A Russian nuclear submarine with a frigate is landing with the oil tanker. That I think that's a long first after so many decades we've seen that, right? And this is a message that Russia was able to break the blockade of Americans and supply oil to Cuba. And
also timing, optics matter.
Optics matter. And then at the same time, you had the Iran loop also. So technically, अगर आप देखो, if I'm allowed to speak in Hindi, because लोग समझना चाहते हैं, ये Russia and China together, Russia and Iran together, and all this, they have been able, Russia, Iran, and China, they've been able to break the American stranglehold over the blockades and the sanction regime. The sanction regime in Iran is blown to smithereens. The sanction regime against Russian oil is blown to smithereens, because you need these two oil to stabilize the market. Otherwise, oil would be at $130, $140 and your economy will be conked off. And plus, they were able to break the Cuba blockade. Plus, it is very, hilariously, it is actually the Iranians who have sanctioned America on use of Hormuz. It is a reverse sanction which we have seen first time. First time a superpower has been sanctioned by a regional power. You can't use, everyone else can sail, you sit on the sidelines and just watch. Murdarshan ban ke dekhte raho. So this is how oil game is. So there are, in the oil games are going to be many people, many countries are going to become the hegemons, the new monopolist. Obviously, the whole American, beat Canada, beat USA, beat Argentina, Brazil, they will dominate the energy complex. They will take a lot of share from GCC. So GCC countries stand to be the losers ultimately in this. despite them, sticking up or sucking up to the, the American military might or American military umbrella, Saab maar do Iran ko, but all that stuff. But they will still end up as losers.
But this
What
is
they don't
also
realize.
possibly payback for them, right? Because they started transacting in the yuan, they started transacting in other currencies, and obviously this was something the US was not going to take very kindly. And they got
Correct?
the opportunity. Israel obviously has been itching for a fight for a very, very long time. It did not find takers with the Biden administration. With the Trump administration, things have been interesting.
Yeah. So,
So,
yeah. So next, I'll move to, I'll come to the second first order effect, which are going to be fertilizers. So you have the
no, no,
fertilizers.
one second. Before you go to the next topic. So India was what? We were the first country, right, to be able to get our ship out of Hormuz. Globally,
Yeah.
were we the first? We were the first.
Yeah. Yes, we were the first.
And in Europe, Spain was the first.
Yes. So basically, we were the ones who showed to the world that diplomacy is so that through diplomacy you can get your work done. We got the work done. We broke the Hormuz barrier by talking back channel with Iran. Then suddenly the Chinese realized, oh, India has done it. They also formalized their deal. Then the Pakistanis came along, and then
Sri
finally
Lanka. Sri Lanka
Sri
too,
Lanka.
right?
Yes, and then the Spanish came along, and then Meloni and everyone in France is looking, right? If their ships can go through, why can't I? Why should I suffer? We all need natural gas, no, for
But
our pipelines.
yeah, I mean, and I believe that they're also denying the US the use of their airspace for the war now.
Yep, correct. France has denied it.
Spain denied,
Fra-
France denied.
France denied. Italy said, you can't land at my bases because you don't have the permission for these missions. Okay?
And Poland refused to give up its batteries.
Yes, and Switzerland also denied the airspace.
Of
It
course.
says, I'm neutral, so I can't be siding in the war.
South Korea gave them up.
Yeah, South Korea gave them up. Correct.
And South Korea has been the biggest sort
Yeah.
of loser.
Yes, because they lose out on the helium supplies.
No, not just that. A significant portion of the energy exports from Hormuz were going to South Korea and Japan.
Yeah. US allies, supply chains. Okay.
So Kissinger's theory remains true, right? Being an ally is fatal.
True that. Being a friend of America is okay, is hazardous. But being an enemy is hazardous. But being a friend is fatal. That whatever that was. Anyway, okay. So next we move on to the second order effect. The first order effect, the second, and the major one is going to be fertilizers. So you just guys needs to just understand that the Gulf countries export nearly 30 to 40% fertilizers of the world, which includes ammonia, majority, 90%. Saudi Arabia is one of the biggest producers of ammonia. And Qatar gives 50% ammonia to United States imports 50% of its ammonia from Qatar. India imports 30% from Qatar. We also used to import potash and DAP, which is the specialized fertilizers from Saudi Arabia and to a certain extent with Morocco. The other countries which produce these specialized fertilizers or urea are Russia and China, right? Now, with this Hormuz Strait blocked, what has happened is the price of these ammonia fertilizers have virtually gone up by 35 to 40% in Iowa, which is in USA for you American farmers. It has also gone up equally in North Carolina, where these fertilizers are now virtually 60% up. Similarly, for India, we are also facing a kind of a shortage because the Chinese have refused to give us fertilizer because they for X, Y, Z reasons. We know how the Chinese operate, and Russians. The only problem is that Russia operates. We are operating urea and fertilizers, but the Russian plants are being hit by Ukrainian drones, so even their capacity is not operating at full. And there was a fertilizer plant in Australia, which was shut down for 2 months because of maintenance. So we have a very, very tight supply chains of fertilizers. And altogether, if I would to call you, Middle East and North Africa contributes nearly 43% of total ammonia, nitrogen ammonia fertilizers. And they're quite essential because we have a sowing season coming up in the northern hemisphere from India to America. And if these supply chains or these supplies don't reach those farmers, there's going to be a scarcity. There's going to be a crop shortfall, a food crisis, and obviously inflation will go haywire.
So if we talk about timelines, in May in Saudi, that is when Hajj. That's the last week of May. That is Hajj.
Yep,
In
yep,
June, in May and June, we have sowing season.
yep.
Yeah. And we are
So,
already in, I mean, we will be in April from tomorrow.
yep, already.
Hmm.
And if I were to like for oil and gas before we complete the first order effects, if I go to oil and gas, JP Morgan gave out a very interesting estimate that most deliveries to the East Asia, that is Japan, South Korea, Vietnam, will stop by 1st of April. The second impact is going to come on to South of Africa, which has already stopped between 20th of March. Then next will come Europe when 10th of April. Today we heard that even Heathrow Airport is having diesel shortage and they're going to stop flights. Lufthansa has cancelled 20 flights because they don't have the jet fuel. And President Trump was today mocking, oh, you want jet fuel, come to me. Or you go to Iran, talk to them and get the Hormuz open. By the way, Donald Trump.
Potential airline bankruptcy, that is one.
Yeah.
And the
Yeah.
second thing is, once the existing stock that is available, that one exhausts. And that's maybe just a question of another month before they find takers. And here is going to be a government competing against another government. And we've already seen tankers being diverted, right? The ones that were going towards Europe they were diverted towards Asia because that's where they got more money.
Yeah.
Once the existing stock exhausts itself, with what is left, any rational extrapolation is not going to hold true.
Absolutely. It's law of the jungle. Whoever builds more
No, because
gets it.
energy security is the most basic requirement. So what are you going to do? I mean, you're not even talking rationing. You're not even talking work from home 2 days a week, 3 days a week, free public transport. No, you're not even talking about all that. You're just basically saying basic energy. If it is not available, whatever percentage is available, how will you even then justify the price? Because not only do you have an increase in price because of basic price hike because of the war. On top of that, you have a price hike because of risk premium. After that, you have an increase in price because logistical costs go up. And after that, you have a price hike because it becomes a seller's market.
Indeed. 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 The sellers decide what price do they want to offer because the buyers have no other option but to buy from them. It's a monopoly. It's called cartelization, as I would say ultimately.
It's not cartelization. See, beyond the point, why are governments, for example, today, why Spain or why is Italy, why are these countries saying that we do not want to participate? Because at the end of the day, they are elected representatives and they are answerable to their own citizens. They want to remain in power. Beyond the point, they are going to be asked questions by their people that why is this our problem? Sending aid to Ukraine when the world was operating relatively normally was a different matter. But today, when any of these countries are not going to have gas available, they're not going to have basic fuel available, obviously they're going to ask their people. And these people want to come back to power.
Indeed, totally. So as you said, that is exactly how it's going to play out. Everyone for their own public. France is going to go to election next year. They cannot take a chance. You have the Italy who has to look after their LNG shipment is stopped. You have Germany who wants to take gas, who are looking for. The Europe is already pleading to Ukraine that that you please do not close the oil pipeline from Russia, and Ukraine is doing its own antics, sending drones to Russia and striking those pipelines and gases. So there is a different dramatic way, different thing. The only option what I see for Europe is, for at least for oil, I don't know about gas. Gas they can obviously get from Turkey as well, the Baku pipeline. But what do you say? The only option for Europe is, the Russian crude comes to India, gets refined, and goes back over there. The same loop begins again, which was stopped by Donald Trump. So, we're back to square one insofar as that is concerned.
Except this time Russian oil is not sanctioned. At that time, they were using the loophole. This time, there is no need to use a loophole because it's legit.
Yes, exactly. Anyway, so this was about the first order effect, which is immediately visible, which is the immediate disruption of supply of oil, gas, and fertilizers. And in between, obviously, because if you, let's say you have potash, even for potash, if you have to convert, like Morocco has a lot of potash, which is used in fertilizers. But to convert that into your fertilizer, you need sulfur, and that sulfur comes from Saudi Arabia. So that there is another problem over there, right? So you have all these first hand effects of these disruptions of these Gulf of the Persian Gulf War, which is going on at this minute. Then now we come to the second order effects. Now the second order effects are, Himja, what happens to, we've seen these disruptions happen. How do these disruptions happen the economies? How do they, impact the industry, the supply chains and manufacturing? That is the most critical part. Unfortunately, what we have seen is, we've seen the geopolitical commentary, but people have not understood what is the economic side of it, how it's going to impact. Ultimately, we'll also come to the geopolitical stuff a bit later on. But I think the geopolitical, the industrial, the second order effect on industrial supply chain and manufacturing, they're going to be many industries: petrochemicals, textiles, plastics, packaging, rubber, medicines, because you need generic medicine, because you need chemicals for that. And you have other helium for semiconductors, which is going to impact the tech ecosystem. You will have electronics, because you will need for assembly boards and all that. You need those oils for making those chips, running those industries and all that stuff. And then you have the auto sector, because a lot of plastic is used in cars and manufacturing and everything. So that also, then you have aluminium, because you had Iran bomb aluminium plant in UAE, and a Bahrain, which has actually stopped 10% aluminium supply in the world. And then you had, so all this counted together, you had then even in processing steel in India, we used to get those the raw material from Dubai. Now that raw material cannot reach to India because the Hormuz is blocked. So even the steel prices have gone up. So the construction becomes expensive. Anything related to plastics, anything to petrochemical, paints, dyes, everything gets expensive. So these are the second order effects. What you have to say on
No,
that?
no, it's not just that. I think if you remember when we were writing our first book and we were actually researching, we were talking about the entire GCC nexus. That was from a different, it was from a terror funding perspective, and we were just trying to imagine a world beyond oil. Nobody thought a situation like this would actually transpire. But if you remember, we had literally made that list. It is almost impossible to imagine a world in which fossil fuels would not be there. Because even if you manage an alternate as far as energy is concerned, as far as petrol, oil, gas, diesel, they are concerned, their components, the byproducts, are critical to so many industries. Where do you even start and where do you stop?
True. And I'll take a classic case of helium, because that's a very important point. Now, helium used to, like South Korea takes around 90% of helium, or 60 to 70% of helium from Qatar. And in that helium, now helium is used for cooling the semiconductor fabrication plants, right? And the tech ecosystem, it is used because South Korea, Japan, and Taiwan, they need these LNG shipments to, the helium shipments to go.
Also critical for diagnostics, MRIs.
Correct. MRIs, correct.
In fact,
Magnets
in
of
fact, with the more you talk about the supply chain secondary effects, the one thing that if you sort of think about all the industries that they are impacting, of course, like I said, no industry is actually exempt from the impact. But in reality, most countries and most sectors that are going to be hit immediately, because like I said, we still don't know. It's almost every day we are discovering, oh, this is also going to get impacted, that's also going to get impacted. Most of the US led supply chain and their allies, they are the ones that are actually getting hit the hardest.
Indeed. South Korea. Japan, Australia, Taiwan. These are these are used to they use these oil, these petrochemical, these industrial gases, these chemicals to manufacture, tech, things for, what you say, your uh, tech things for uh, the American big tech giants. So if these countries get impacted, because as per JP Morgan, they will get impacted by the first week of April, and if these supply chains shut down or they go slow, the American tech bubble is at risk. Their whole tech supply chain is at risk. So anyone who says that America, because they have their own LNG, is not at risk, is telling you a first order effect, but is not telling you the second
No,
order
the
effect.
American tech bubble is also at risk because a lot of their funding was coming from the sovereign wealth funds. The GCC
GCCs.
was there. I mean, the GCC has been one of their biggest allies, and their petrodollars were significantly going towards funding their entire tech ecosystem. Now, now
Absolutely.
with the kind of damages that the GCC has been facing, and today we had I believe the U.S. press secretary. She came out and said that President Trump was looking at getting the GCC to pay for the war. That this is something he was considering, whereas in reality, it should be the other way around. GCC is
Exactly.
actually owed repatriations for all the damages that have been done to them for a war that they have not asked for.
Indeed.
So with all this money that they have now set up, I mean that they have lost, they are going to be using it towards rebuilding whatever they can rebuild. And of course, they will have to look at moving beyond just being an oil economy. So a certain percentage of the funding that was going out towards the tech bubble is also going to be impacted because they're going to have to
Yeah.
worry more about spending their money on welfare, rebuilding their economies because they also need to survive.
Indeed, 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 indeed. So on this, if for a short interjection, to just to break the monotony, Sid is there, so he knows about a lot about semiconductors and all that. Sid, would you like to come in for a minute and give a short one?
हाँ,
Yeah, please.
मैं मैं बोल ये बता रहा था कि हीलियम विच इज कतर्स की 30% प्रोडक्शन है वर्ल्ड की आपकी। साउथ कोरिया में 97 to 99% ऑफ द इंपोर्ट ऑफ हीलियम गोज डायरेक्टली इनटू द प्रोसेस ऑफ सेमीकंडक्टर्स। और हीलियम जो ऑफ प्रोसेस
We lost
का
you.
प्रोडक्ट है, इट इज यूज इन मल्टीपल प्रोडक्ट्स। जैसे आपका जो एचिंग का प्रोसेस होता है ऑन द वेफर इटसेल्फ, उसकी थर्मल मैनेजमेंट का काम जो होता है उस वेफर के साथ साथ उस मशीन का भी, विच इज ईयूवी लिथोग्राफी मशीन्स जो होती हैं उनकी भी कूलिंग का, एंड इवन वेफर की कूलिंग का भी जो काम होता है वो आपके हीलियम से होता है। उसके साथ साथ में जिस एरिया के अंदर आपका सेमीकंडक्टर मैन्युफैक्चर होता है या एच होता है, उसकी इन्वायरमेंटल स्टेबिलिटी, बिकॉज हीलियम इज वन ऑफ द इनर्ट गैसेस एंड हैज अ वेरी लो रिएक्टिविटी लेवल, इसीलिए वो पूरा रूम जो है आपका हीलियम से भरा होता है और उसको यूज किया जाता है टू मेक श्योर कि आपका जो लेजर या जो यूवी लाइट है वो किसी अदर लाइट के साथ, अदर किसी केमिकल के साथ और इवन एलिमेंट के साथ रिएक्ट ना करे, टू मेक श्योर द सेमीकंडक्टर इज 100% प्रूफिंग। एक और केमिकल है विच इज क्वाइट मेनी पीपल हैव मिस्ड एक्चुअली, विच इज ब्रोमीन। ब्रोमीन भी जो है वो सेमीकंडक्टर में मैन्युफैक्चर होता है। अराउंड 30 to 35% ऑफ द ब्रोमीन इज एक्चुअली प्रोड्यूस्ड बाय इजराइल एंड जॉर्डन। और ब्रोमीन इज वन ऑफ द मोस्ट क्रिटिकल एलिमेंट फॉर सेमीकंडक्टर एक्चुअली, क्योंकि जो आपका डायरेक्टली सेमीकंडक्टर में जो इचिंग होती है ना, एक एचिंग होती है, आपका जो लाइंस आप अपने मदरबोर्ड से अपने चिपसेट में कभी देखोगे वो गोल्डन कॉपर लाइंस टाइप का बना होता है, उस प्रोसेस की जो मैन्युफैक्चरिंग होती है ना वो ब्रोमीन के थ्रू की जाती है। ठीक है, और ब्रोमीन का 35% ऑफ द सप्लाई जो है वो आपका मिडिल ईस्ट से आता है, जो पूरा ठप पड़ चुका है अभी फिलहाल के लिए। एंड सबसे बड़ा प्रॉब्लम क्या है ना कि इनका कोई सब्स्टिट्यूट नहीं है अभी तक में दुनिया के पास में, एंड ये बहुत ज्यादा प्रॉब्लमैटिक है अगर सेमीकंडक्टर मैन्युफैक्चरिंग एकदम हॉल्ट पे आ जाएगी। और इसमें सबसे ज्यादा डैमेज जो है वो मतलब दुनिया को तो होगा ही होगा, बट इसमें सबसे ज्यादा डैमेज यूएस को भी होगा, क्योंकि आज के अभी के करंट सिचुएशन में डिस्पाइट ट्रंप ने अपने टैरिफ का इस्तेमाल करके बहुत से सेमीकंडक्टर मैन्युफैक्चरिंग को यूएस सॉइल पे ले आया है, but those factories are still under construction, and the most and the matlab, जो earliest possible semiconductor fab unit is going to come alive in 2028. So majority of the import of semiconductor into America is from South Korea itself. Samsung and SK Hynix are one of the largest producer of DRAM, NAND, जो आपकी storage memory chips होती हैं, जो आपका SD कार्ड और वो सब होता है, हार्ड ड्राइव्स में इस्तेमाल होती हैं, उन सबका सबसे बड़ा सप्लायर आपका साउथ कोरिया है. एंड एक्चुअल में अभी हालत ये हो गई थी कि इन द फर्स्ट 7 day of the war, these total two of the companies have lost in and around $200 billion in combined. तो सिचुएशन यहाँ पे इनके लिए बहुत ज्यादा क्रिटिकल है साउथ कोरिया के लिए. ना इकोनॉमी बच पाएगी, क्योंकि साउथ कोरिया का बहुत बड़ा मेजर सेक्टर जो है 32 to 35% ऑफ द इकोनॉमी रन्स ऑन सेमीकंडक्टर. अच्छा, इसमें ताइवान के लिए भी बहुत दिक्कत है, बिकॉज ताइवान चाइना से लेता नहीं है. ताइवान डज नॉट गेट एनी हीलियम फ्रॉम रशिया एज वेल. वो भी मिडिल ईस्ट पे डिपेंडेंट है हीलियम एंड ब्रोमीन के लिए, और वो वहां पर भी फंस रहा है. तो ये ताइवान के लिए भी बहुत डिट्रीमेंटल है उनकी इकोनॉमी के लिए, जो कि सेमीकंडक्टर पे बहुत ज्यादा हेविली डिपेंडेंट है विद टीएसएमसी.
True, true. Agreed, agreed. Great. So, so the point over here is just one last point on the helium front, and which is very interesting. So, helium is stored in tanks and tankers, and it is sent from Qatar to Saudi Arabia. Sorry, South Korea. It takes around, they say helium, it's a gas, that if you don't use it or it's not properly deployed within 40-45 days, the gas goes, the quality of the gas decreases and it cannot be used, it's a waste. It's been nearly 35 days, those tankers are still stuck at Qatar. They have not moved. And if they don't reach in next 5-10 days in South Korea, all those shipments which are even standing in the Strait of Hormuz are gone. They are good as dead. So there's going to be a shortage of supply of helium, semiconductor supply chain, and semiconductor means AI GPU chips. AI GPU chip shortage means Nvidia. So you have all those, those second order, third order effects start coming out on that. Similarly, petrochemical. Petrochemical means you take, jet fuel shortage, the aviation goes down, diesel shortage, and, Australia is facing a diesel shortage. So, you have all these auto sector, places, because if you don't have plastics, how do you manufacture the parts of the automobiles? So you see, the paints get expensive because the crude oil is expensive. So you see, everything is going to have the first order, second order, industry, third order. So now we come to, I think we have mostly discussed the second order effect. I guess we mostly have.
And
Now let's come.
also one more
Yeah.
thing, Navroop. What happens is that with every effect, right, beyond a period of time, the impact of it is no longer proportional. It becomes disproportional. And that is where literally all bets are off, because you really cannot, it becomes impossible to build a model beyond the point. Up to a certain point where certain things are possible, certain things are not possible, where you can still guarantee, where you can still predict a certain supply chain, because ultimately all models are built on basis of relative certainty.
True.
Here,
Agreed.
there is no certainty, and there is also no indication of when, or there is no indication of when we are looking at the probability of some certainty.
Yeah. We don't know when it's going to come.
We don't know. And we also don't know that even if it does come, there will be small windows. How stable are those windows likely to be? How long will they last? So as of now, you are literally looking at a period of uncertainty, which is fairly long.
True. So now we begin on the third order effects. And the biggest issue is, third order effects. We want to talk about high energy prices, inflation rate hike, and all that stuff. How it's going to be?
No. I think third order effects. Before you go to that, before we talk about tertiary, let's just talk about why this is nothing like the 1973 embargo. It is not 1973. It is not COVID. It is not 2008. We are saying it's like a combination. Why?
Yeah. Shall I go with the data?
Please.
It will be very interesting. Okay. So, आप लोगों को ये समझना जरूरी है. I'll speak in हिंदी ताकि आराम से रहे. Gross federal rate US का was $458 billion in 1973. 2008 crash, it was $10 trillion. COVID crash, it was $27 trillion. And today it is around $39 trillion. It will be touch 40 in next 1 year. So from 458 billion to 40 trillion. That's the journey which America has made in debt. Debt to GDP ratio. It was at oil embargo in 1973, 33 to 35%. Financial crash, जो 2008 का आया, 64 to 68%. COVID crash was 125%, and even now it is 125%. So from 35 in 1973 to 125% debt to GDP. Annual deficit of, that's a deficit which the US government is accounting for, of the budget deficits, of GDP, percentage of GDP. Oil embargo time, it was 1%. 2000 financial crisis, it was average 4-5%. It spiked after the collapse. Okay. COVID, it was 14 to 15%. Now it is again 6.2%. It is supposed to touch 7% once again. Fed balance sheet, now which is very interesting, was $100 billion. It expanded to $2 trillion plus the QE after 2008 financial crisis to support the banks and after the mortgage bust, housing bubble bust. It peaked after COVID crash to $9 trillion because they had to stimulate the economy. And then Jerome Powell, after doing quantitative tightening, got it to $6.7 trillion. So from 100 billion to 6.7 trillion. That is the balance sheet. So now, after this data, you understand that inka debt is out of proportion. Debt to GDP is out of proportion. Deficit is touching 7%. And Fed balance sheet is around $7 trillion. Means, in this crisis, US is at far, far, far worse financial position than it was in 1973. 2008 or 2020.
More importantly,
Yeah.
whenever this crisis comes to an end, whether it's a temporary thing, whether it's a ceasefire, whatever it is, whenever that happens, it is not like 1973 where the taps will come on from the next day and where normalcy will in a very short period of time. That is not possible.
True.
That is not going
And
to
we
happen.
must, yeah. True. And we must all remember, we all must remember one thing, that if the food prices, energy prices are going to go up, there's going to be disruption in LNG and gas. I mean oil and gas. There's going to be disruption in food prices. There's going to be high inflation because of fertilizer shortage. That means already OECD, which is the body, has come out. The US inflation is going to touch 4.2%, and the rate hikes are postponed till September. I mean, rate cuts are postponed till September. The Fed is likely to maintain rates or they're likely to hike rates. And if they start hiking rates, there's going to be a massive liquidity squeeze in the market. And if, yeah.
There already is a
Sushant.
liquidity squeeze. I mean, look at the bond market yield.
Yeah, exactly. The 10-year bond, the 30-year bond is touching 5. The 10-year is touching around 4.4, I guess, 4.3, 4.4.
It was already at 4.6. I believe 10 or 20 touched 4.6. There was a lot of selling. It's back to 4.4.
Yeah.
But it is still at very, very worrying numbers, because that actually means that you are looking at a liquidity crunch all the way. Not just this. This is also going to spiral, because when you have because countries globally will be dealing with multiple hits. They are not only dealing, so for India, even for other countries, not only are you dealing with an increase in energy cost, you're also dealing with an increase in food cost. You're also dealing with increase in inflation. At the same time, because of a lot of restrictions and industries being hit, countries will be forced to absorb some of these hits. So their budgets are going to go for a toss. Their fiscal discipline is going to go for a toss. They will absorb some of it they will pass on to the consumer, depending on the country, depending on situation to situation. That is one part. The other part of it is that countries will now be forced to rethink what if a situation like this comes to pass again. So they will start evaluating their their energy, their food, and their defense. Their defense, most importantly. So when you start doing that, not only are you taking a hit in terms of having to feed your citizens in a more economical manner, in a more efficient manner, you are also forced to now sort of think about how you are allocating your resources towards whatever the government spending was. So, for example, today we did read, right, that the US said that a lot of the funding of the war is coming out of healthcare.
Yep, $200 billion budget is being cut by Axios reported it.
Yes. So this is
Yeah.
the situation of the country which holds the most powerful economy in the world. We are not even talking about their debt. We are just saying this is their situation. What happens to other countries? All countries are working on limited budgets. What happens to a country like India? What happens to a country like China, where we have a billion plus mouths to feed? What happens to Africa? What happens to so many other countries?
Like India and China would still be able to manage somehow due to Russian oil and gas or something. Imagine countries who are sitting at the margins. Like Bangladesh is virtually paying India diesel de do, fertilizers de do. Countries like Pakistan, Thailand, Vietnam. Thailand is having a problem of diesel with jetties. They can't go to Phuket. Then you have Vietnam, which is also suffering. So all these countries who are sitting on the margins virtually, they're like India as a bulk buyer still, as a fourth largest economy, still has some leverage to with the global power, but the other countries simply don't have it. And that is where the problem lies. And imagine if the inflation spikes to 4.5%, 5%. And in that, if you start cutting rates, if you have to stimulate the economy because the growth will go down because there's a liquidity crunch, you will have to do something to support. You will be printing into a high inflation zone, and that would actually mean, breaking the bond market totally. So this is a disaster scenario for America, whichever way you look at economically. They cannot afford a high inflation. They cannot afford high energy inflation. They cannot even, which is why you see, Trump administration manipulating the markets, Monday to Friday.
No, they are manipulating it for their personal gain. I mean, I think their insider trading is extremely obvious. I mean, they're not even pretending to hide it.
Yep.
I mean, they're not even pretending. Yeah.
Yeah. So okay. So now we'll soon move on to and if they continue So I'll complete the point. So if they don't print, where will the capex money come from for AI? And if they print, the bond market breaks. And if they don't print, the AI bubble pops. And if the AI bubble pops due to the helium shortage, or X shortage, or Y shortage, then they lose the race with China. Because the Chinese have ready infrastructure of a whole grid equivalent to the whole grid of America built in last 10 years. And they have built so much of solar capacity that they added 250 gigawatts of solar energy this year, the highest in last year, 2025. And plus, they have those infrastructure. The Americans were starting to build the infrastructure, and this crisis has come. So is this crisis America first or is it America last? That begs the question. This is why it is a very interesting study, how this crisis shapes the destiny of American economy and American public, because ultimately this is going to consume the whole trade agenda, the whole reshoring, reindustrializing agenda, which the President Donald Trump and his team came up with. And the whole system, and if the AI bubble pop, that's it. The story is over, because as Nvidia chairman say, the Chinese are just milliseconds behind us. They are integrating low cost AI solutions with their products in BYD and other and laptops and AI and robotics and another system. They can mass manufacture. They have by 2030 all their public transport will be on electric energy. So they have built those alternatives. You haven't.
We haven't actually seen China make an official entry in the war yet. I mean, China has entered unofficially in so many ways, but it hasn't officially entered, except for I believe they put out a peace plan agenda today. I think with Pakistan, that's what they did. But we haven't seen that otherwise.
Yeah,
So
totally. Okay. So before we go to the next portion, which is going to be geopolitics stuff, which everyone likes, and then and the military and the geopolitics stuff, I have a one question from Mango, my dear lawyer friend. So go ahead, please. And then after that, we'll continue with that. And once we are done, then we'll open the house possible for some questions, please.
Thank you, Navroop sir, for saying that. Navroop sir, मेरा बस यही question था, like what Himja was rightfully pointing out now, that what happens to, I mean, even if the war was to end yesterday, let's say we have gone back so many years that it's going to be very difficult to rebuild it. Like even if you get the supply chain sorted, even if you get everything that we want, even if we get all the clearances today, Toby, I think we have gone back so much that it's going to take a lot, like it's going to take a long while before you can rebuild. So, but Navroop sir, why is the pressure not coming from these countries? Why is the pressure not coming from international communities to tell US that you yourself? I mean, you are also at loss because they're losing soldiers. Like you mentioned, the fiscal deficit. It's the worst. It has never been. I mean, it's the first even for the US. So why is the pressure not coming from these countries to kind of intervene? Because I've seen like France, Spain, Italy, they have of course closed their air bases. They're not participating in the war, but they're not telling US to kind of stop and find a diplomatic channel to sort this out. I mean, the conditions that Iran has laid out, I don't think it's that difficult for America to agree to. So why can't they find a middle ground and like close this chapter? Because even they are at loss, rightfully.
True, true. And I think, Mango, that's a good question. I'll keep that in mind when we are going to the geopolitical part of it. Okay. So the next we have done, we covered the first order effects, the immediate breakdown. We covered who are going to get in LNG and oil and fertilizers. Second order effect, how the industries are going to be impacted, supply chains. Third order, how this is going to come into finance, markets, rates, and every bond market and all that stuff. And finally, we come down to the military portion and the geopolitical stuff. Okay. So the biggest casualty of this war, I think, which is very less discussed, you know, which obviously the Western media wants to hide it, is the US MIC, which has taken a hit. Apart from 13 bases, which New York Times claim have been knocked out, $6 billion worth systems have been destroyed. Hard batteries, Patriot missile system, famous radars in Qatar, in Kuwait, those bases have been left uninhabitable. These were the words by the New York Times. Even interestingly, the US has exhausted 980 Tomahawk cruise missile on Iran in nearly last 4 weeks. And the production of Pentagon is 10 missiles, 90 missiles per year. That is 10 years of, the stockpile has been exhausted in 4 weeks. So if they want to manufacture these, you got an F-35 hit, you got the 14 MK, 12 to 13 MK M29 Reaper drone hit. Yesterday, the figure came that on the Prince Sultan Air Base in Saudi Arabia, two AWACS have been hit, which were the jewels of American surveillance, which is a bigger strategic hit, property hit. And then you had the Strato tankers, which were lost at Prince Sultan Air Base. So you had and then you have the Israeli interception system of Arrow, David Sling. There is a very interesting Institute of Pain, and it put out days at which the interceptions would run out. Israel Arrow 2 munition ran out on 27th of March. Allied defensive third partner, again defensive, 10 days left to depletion. 3rd of April is the last day. Israel Blue Sparrow air-launched ballistic missile, only 12 days left to the stock getting exhausted. It will finish on 5th of April. Then Atacams and Piassam and US offensive, only 18 days का सामान बचा है. 12 अप्रैल को ये भी स्टॉक खत्म हो जाएगा. Israel operated, 18 दिन का माल रह गया है. 11 अप्रैल को ये भी एग्जॉस्ट हो जाएगा. ठीक है. And then you have Patriot in the Gulf partner, 33 दिन का माल बचा है. 26 तारीख को पूरा खत्म हो जाएगा. Similarly, you have spice guided bomb जो इजराइल बनाता है, जो इंडियन एयरफोर्स भी यूज करती है. ठीक है. 54 days, 18 को खत्म हो जाएगा. So there's a whole list which they have given. the kind of exhaustion which is going to take place. But India, even more interesting point is, and everyone over here, you want to build an F-47, which is the latest jet which they've decided to build. You want to operate a F-35, which also got hit. You want to build a Tomahawk missile.
You need one
You
critical
need
thing.
to
Where are you going to get it from?
yes,
Who's going to give it to you?
yes. You need critical raw material, rare earth minerals, neodymium, selenium, and that's 95% produced by China. So, dear Pete Hegseth, Secretary of Defense, if you have to build American military and munitions back, you have to build certain missile systems, certain radars back, you will need those chips for SATCOMs, semiconductor chips. You will for satellite navigation, all that stuff. You will need those that helium. And if I go one leg up, you will need those rare earths. How are you going to assure that? And that is the chokehold which the China has over US defense ecosystem, because they have drained so much in this war that they will need at least years to rebuild their arsenals. And if Chinese can choke the supply chain, they can literally, laugh at America, while they're getting the supplies exhausted, because the Chinese will have a better way access to Taiwan
So,
later on. And by the
so
way,
basically, you're saying that
yeah,
China just needs to choke the supply chain and Iran just needs to find a way to prolong the war.
yeah, that's it. If Iran can prolong the war, China can choke the supply chain, and Russia can continue to provide strategic intelligence and target, where US bases and assets are located. Mari jao, khichi jao. It's done. So this is the problem. And Iran has, taken to asymmetry, I have seen so much. One thing is a fact. Conventionally, there is no match to the American military or
I was
Israeli military. They are
actually just
convinced.
going to say that did we ever think that we would get to see the US military being humbled like this? I mean, with China, we always knew, because we always know what our military experts have been speaking about the Chinese abilities. But with the US, it's a different ball game. We never thought
Yep,
we would get to see this.
yep, exactly. So, you see this very interesting stuff that the Americans use B2, B1, B52, all these, the sophisticated weapons, but unable to change the regime. And then you had the Iranians use asymmetrical warfare. They expanded the war horizontally towards the Gulf state. They took out those 13 bases. And guess what happened? Israel, which used to get an alert of a ballistic or a hypersonic missile coming to hit Tel Aviv or Dimona or Beersheba or all those areas in Israel, they used to get alerted around to 15, 20 minutes before, because the missile launch, in Iran could be detected from a radar in Dubai. Now that radar is gone. Those eyes are gone. So what it does, when the missile reaches Jordan, and that is when the Turkey's radar is able, or American flying AWACS are able to, locate that the
No,
missile is
but tell
coming.
me one thing. Before we even talk about this, historically, has any country ever been able to pull off a regime change just using air attack?
Never.
So
Never is the word
why would they even think that a strategy like that would work in a country that is used to being tough, that is resilient, that is for want of a better word, the creator of uh, basically child terrorism. I mean, they were the first ones to use children and women as human bombs. Did they
Yep.
not ever study about the way the Shia militia operates? It's very, very different compared to the way the other GCC countries operate. And you know
Exactly.
what is even more interesting? There was a certain significant percentage of the population that was already against the regime. It was not going to be difficult. In doing this, they actually united everybody in going after the Ayatollah. That is something they really should not have done.
And this, comes out to be ultimately at a so there is a strategy failure over here. I would not say it's a military failure, it's a strategy failure.
नवरूप सर, कैन
convert.
आई इंटरवीन 1 सेकेंड? आई एम सो सॉरी, मैंने आपको लिंक शेयर किया है ग्रुप पे हमारे एनडीटीवी का वो है. आई एम नॉट श्योर इफ वी हैव डिस्कस दिस, बट ईरान इज नाउ प्लानिंग टू स्ट्राइक 18 टेक कंपनीज जो उसको लगता है दे वर कॉम्प्लिसिट इन दिस वॉर एंड उनके
Yes,
अगेंस्ट टारगेटेड अटैक किया था.
they
Oh,
Yeah,
we
have
yeah,
discussed
asked the
that. Okay.
employees of all these countries to move
Yeah,
away.
to
Yes,
vacate.
Apple, etc.
Yeah,
All
to
of them.
vacate that.
Yes, I
ठीक.
mean the US tech ecosystem. I'm aware.
yeah, correct. Okay, so that's that. Let's see if they implement this threat because there's a lot of threat going back and forth between Trump and them. So now they were the strategy failure. The strategy failure is you did you discount that the fact that Ayatollah Ali Khamenei was a titular religious head. He was not a political person. Number two, did you discount IRGC's ideological control over Iran's economy, Iran's oil, its shadow fleet, and the whole thing out? Did you not understand how hardened Shia militias are? इनके खून में शहादत कूट कूट के भरी जाती है बचपन से. Did you not know that these people, they fight like, fierce fighters. They are not like, softies of the GCC countries who are living in palatial bungalows and all that stuff, right? They have lived a hard life in these deserts and mountains of Persia. Do they not also understand, that by trying to eliminate Ali Khamenei, you are going to create sympathy for the regime? Did you not anticipate that Russia and China are going to provide strategic intelligence to them and provide satellite, provide electronic warfare to destroy Starlink connectivity and do all that kind of stuff, which is very essential to for Iran to be able to resist? The Iranians were they helped Russia in providing drones in Ukraine. So it is natural the Russians will also apply help them out.
Not just that, they completely validated everything the IRGC was talking about the United States to the Iranian people.
Yes, that they are not your liberators. They are actually want to kill you all. And the kind of language which came from Pete Hegseth, they are messianic cult. They are radical. They need to be destroyed. The state needs to be culled. This kind of language only. If someone say I don't want to use those words. Some very harsh words are there. Normal people
They
do not.
actually thought it would be as easy as Venezuela.
Yeah.
problem is na कि they are trying to be radicals with people who are radical ultra pro max, and that's the issue with it.
Sid, this is uh, this is very interesting. So when I write about Iranian capabilities and I talk about what they've been able to do, how they've been able to carry out hybrid warfare so effectively, I get a lot of responses when people tell me, they reply to me and say, oh, you should not be in favor of the Iranian regime, or you should stop admiring a terror regime. What people need to understand is you cannot you cannot put fear in the minds of people who are who are very happy to die for their cause. This is
Absolutely.
this is very
Problem
important.
is
The
problem is they're
the
trying to
GC
fight with people who see death in glory in death.
Exactly.
And then
So
that's
one side you have the GCC where whatever even in Saudi Arabia a few years ago when they embarked on their modernism spree, before that they sort of started a drive of something called Saudiization, which basically meant they wanted their citizens to have a job. It could have been titular, it could have been anything, but they wanted that to happen. That was their way of opening up their economy. But the GCC has predominantly been a welfare country for its citizens. They have used welfare as a way to secure their power on one hand, and on the other hand, keep the fundamentalists in check. That is how they have played. They live in luxury. That is the life they want to live.
True.
Now, on
True.
the other side, you have the Iranians, or you have any of the Shia militia. That is, you talk about Hezbollah, you talk about Lebanon, you talk about Iran, you talk about Saudi Arabia's eastern province, you talk about Bahrain, the majority Bahraini population. Their doctrine is very different. They live very differently, and even the ones that have been living in Sunni Arab countries, they have never been considered as equal citizens. So
That's a
they
fact.
know what it is like. Yeah, that is a fact. They know what it is like.
You,
So
you,
you are
you.
effectively, you are trying to compare an apple with an orange. It is not even a logical, it is not even a logical comparison.
More
And
than,
to this, we are not even talking about the fact that the Shias, because they always knew that they had fewer numbers globally. So the Shias have traditionally been very, very open to being flexible. So they have tied up with the communists. They have tied up with the drug cartels. Uh, years ago, we've documented all of this in our book. They are more than happy to have relevant partnerships where it's necessary to further their cause. They exhibit this flexibility because they know exactly what their doctrine is all about. They were the first to use women as shields. They were the first to use children as shields. So in a situation like that, when you are fighting with GCC that is obsessed with their luxury, and the other side you have Iran, and then they thought that these two would be easy, this would be a rollover. I really don't know what they were thinking.
Himja, just to add to that point, even I have faced, in fact, we have collectively, but I in particular will say that many people have called me a jihadist for kind of standing up for Iran and its sovereignty. Because my point was that, whatever the regime has done, that cannot be overlooked and denied. But the fact also remains that we cannot normalize bombing a sovereign nation with its own, ecosystem, with its own law in place, with its own constitution. You cannot just go and bomb because you are like telling people or sort of just projecting that you are going to bring about some sort of a regime change, which by the way is not happening. So this is like this kind of resistance that Abhi you mentioned. Now this I have also faced. Like we all have faced.
Mm.
Like why are you supporting Iran so blindly? Don't you
No,
know
no,
what?
no. In my case, I'm not even. It's not about supporting, and I'm not even bringing into question here why is another country bombing or assassinating the leader of another country. My simple point is that as an analyst, it is really not my job to have an emotional opinion or a moral opinion or an opinion in terms of judgment for any other country. The only opinion I want to have as an analyst is what works in favor of my country. And on that basis, my country needs to take the decisions that it needs to take. You can be moral, you can be judgmental at a personal level, and that is fine. We all have our boundaries. We all have our boundaries where we draw the line for whatever reasons. But as far as your national interests are concerned, what a country does with their citizens is their internal matter. What it does with another country with whom it considers an enemy is a bilateral matter. It is really not our concern. It is not our place to judge. It should not be our place to judge.
So
exactly.
Himja, what would you
We are not
say?
the moral gatekeepers.
Can I add a question, Himja? So, what would you say if somebody was to give the same logic and say that then you, from that logic, cannot be by you? I don't mean you in particular, but like
Yeah, yeah.
if someone was to push back and say then we have no right to speak about Epstein files because then that's US ka internal matter. So, how would you react to that? Like, I
No,
mean.
but that is true. That is true. I mean, like I said, we can have an individual. I mean, we can have an opinion at the individual level, but as long as something is not directly impacting us. So, for example, with Iran, Israel has been a very, very good defense partner as far as India is concerned. Iran has been there for us. Iran has given us oil when we were heavily sanctioned. So we have an independent equation with both of them, and it is not necessary for us to have a stand. Why should we have a stand? If we have which is why if you will ever notice our posturing whenever we have spoken about sort of taking out terrorists in Pakistan, our press releases have always been this is a bilateral matter, and Pakistan has always tried to globalize the matter, but it's a bilateral matter.
Indeed, indeed. So that's a very interesting perspective. Taking this, this conversation further. since we are talking on Iran, and now let's, there are two very interesting developments happening. One, India, we want to talk to you to talk about the GCC country. How do you see the GCC countries and their economy, their investment funds, everything play out? Because what do you think? In my opinion, after this war is over, see now the GCCs have specifically Emiratis. Okay, they are a special case. Okay, so the whole model is based on tourism, real estate, and tech, right? And most of it is America funded,
Yeah.
right?
They are not a pure oil economy, unlike the other
Yes,
two.
yes, correct. Unlike the Qatar or Saudi Arabia, right?
Qatar or
So
KSA, yes.
yeah, correct. So now I do for 1 second. I just do not understand what benefits does that UAE gets to enter into this war or allow itself to be this openly used, or even enter into just kind of posturing against Iran, because just in case America is unable to solve or this war lingers on further, UAE could be the first casualty of this war.
The biggest loser, in fact.
It will be the biggest loser because it is all based on finance and tech, and finance doesn't take a lot of time. Real estate doesn't take a lot of time. People will just sell out and leave.
No, more importantly, what is the moat it offers? So Saudi Arabia is always going to be relevant because of its oil and gas. The same thing applies to Qatar. What is UAE offering that cannot be given elsewhere?
Yes, the supply chains from UAE can easily move to other parts of the world. It can move to Singapore. It can move to Hong Kong. It can move to Gift City in Gujarat, where you can
I
set up
mean,
data center.
Dubai basically built its premise on the basis of zero taxation, no taxation, less taxation, attractiveness of capital, easy movement of capital, and stability. Now, all of these have been questioned.
So you have Dubai, which is going to be the prime sufferer, I believe, or let's say UAE. UAE, correct. And then you will have other bigger sufferer. I believe Bahrain is going to move closer to Iran, because it has a Shia population. Soon you might see a second revolt or an Arab Spring over there.
But Bahrain has always been closer to Iran. I mean, this is nothing new. In fact, I think a lot of people actually this would be the right time for people to actually understand how the Middle East was divided. The Middle East is not even 100 years old. Effectively, it was the Ottoman Empire. The Ottoman Empire, after the British, when it was basically carved out into different parts, there were the different warring tribes that were chosen by the British and the French. Yes, the Sykes-Picot. So when they were, and all these countries were created and they were divided. These are basically man-made borders, and these divisions were made in such a manner that certain tribes they sort of spilled over from one region to the other. So in the Middle East, allegiances are primarily tribal, and then they are sectarian. And in this, you also have that Shia versus Sunni divide. So it's a lot more complicated. So what happens is, still you keep people tied up between the tribal conflicts. Other conflicts don't come to the surface. But the minute other conflicts come into play, it's like a chain reaction. So what you are seeing here, it's actually very interesting, because these tribes that are there are other tribes that would be more than happy to. I mean, if people read, they will see how these different tribes were appointed as heads. I mean, how the Al Thani family, for example, came to rule Qatar, or how the same thing as far as KSA is concerned. So we are going to see this in Bahrain. Oman is actually too small to even really talk about. Oman has actually been, they've been quite smart. The Omanis have been quite smart. The Qataris have been quite smart too, in fact. They have understood.
They've understood the game. They've given 6 billion and they bought peace. Smart
Not just
people.
that, I mean, they share an oil field with Iran, a gas field with Iran.
Yeah, correct, exactly. So they have been smart about it. In the meanwhile, the bigger player in the region, which is KSA, that's a very interesting study. And KSA is, in making another quad of a kind, which is called STEP or pest, whatever you may want to call it, right? And that has Saudi, Turkey, Egypt, and Pakistan. Now, the people met in Riyadh when those strikes on Ras Laffan happened. And then they had a meeting in Islamabad recently where they with these foreign ministers talked about, getting peace done or getting a formula. And they suggested to Donald Trump, maybe, we can form a consortium where we can work together and operate Hormuz, and maybe Pakistan can be part of operating it as a neutral observer.
No, but I
So,
believe even Iran sent a feeler. I mean, they have sort of sent an indirect feeler to KSA. What they're trying to do is basically create, create
fissures.
split. Yeah. And
Split,
that's smart.
split the GCC.
Because so
And
far, it's the UAE and KSA that have been absolutely adamant, because they know that there is a possibility if Iran continues, then their monarchies are probably in trouble.
so, in the end of it, if you look at it, okay, on this part of it, sorry, we have some other issues to discuss, and then we'll open up. Okay, so in the end of it, if today the Iranians control around 20% of the world's oil and trade, and if let's assume the Americans ultimately deploy troop and all that tamasha which is going on, what we see, we're going to go in, we're not going to go in, we're going to go in, we're not going to go in, actually they're going to do something else. Ultimately, they will go in because that's why they've amassed the Marines. Okay. So if they go in, the 82nd Airborne Division is there in Djibouti as well. This all could explode really badly. And there is one hidden part which is not talked about, which most people do not talk about, is Bab al-Mandeb. Right? And if we talk about Bab al-Mandeb, there's a threat that Houthis may start bombing tankers. And it just takes one tanker or a two tanker to block the whole channel, an oil spill, a missile hit, a drone hit. And the Houthis took on nearly eight countries together, and even the Saudis had to stop, कि भाई बहुत हो गया, दुखी हो चुके हम लोग इनसे. And Houthis can also hit Aramco refinery very easily because they're just in the backyard. They're not hitting because the Chinese are told not to do it, because Chinese are in joint venture with Aramco.
See, what happens is, this is not the first time the Houthis have shown how capable they are, right? But what happens is, at that time, you didn't have so many other situations around being hot. What we really need to understand is that they don't actually have to be very successful. Even the perception that they could be successful is enough to make risk premiums unaffordable. When you are in times of war, even perception will do the job, because the rest of the area is already a conflict zone.
So this step alliance of Saudi, Turkey, Egypt, and Pakistan, this is more likely a regional hedge, trying to, hedge yourself, Pakistan provides the nuclear umbrella, Saudi provides the money, Turkey provides the military intelligence of all that stuff, and Egypt provides another, the Suez kind of route. So in that way, these four countries want to, counterbalance the Israeli hegemony to form a pan-Sunni alliance, technically, and to say, we have to get.
But the fact of the matter is that Iran is controlling that belt. How is any of this going to make a difference?
Exactly, that's the point.
And Iran is going to continue extracting toll. So far it was not. Now it will.
Exactly, and more than that, if we were talking about Bab al-Mandeb, I think very few people have talked about insurance. Right?
Yeah, that's what I said. There is premiums. Even the perception of that. Bab al-Mandeb is not the solution for Saudi Arabia permanently.
The Yanbu port, the Yanbu
it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether the movement is northward or southward. Let's just talk about northward, because southward is still where you talk about the strait coming into play. Northward, the strait is not even coming into play, but the Red Sea is coming into play, right?
Yeah, correct. And more than that, it is about, Lloyds of London. They just, let's say, just imagining if one tanker gets hit, as you said, the perception is more important.
No, but the Houthis have already shown that they have fair amount of dominance in airspace over certain parts of the Red Sea. So, like I said, just being able to even hit anything, it just changes the perception.
Correct. So I'm going to go at another point, which I'll just leave a hint for people to understand. So if Houthis just do one or two hits in the Bab al Mandeb Strait, which is even shorter than Hormuz Strait, and the premiums shoot up for insurance, for freight, and everything, and the strait comes to a halt. This is exactly how it happened in Hormuz when Lloyd's Group of London said, we can't reinsure it. Donald Trump said, I'll supply. US Navy will escort. The Pentagon said, nothing doing, sir. We can't go in. And it's a dangerous alley. And then, and JP Morgan said, 20 billion is too less. And Scott Bessent came on TV and saying, will you guys shut up, please? Okay. And not speak out of turn to JP Morgan. And JP Morgan was, by the way, also under, is also under a fire, Jamie Dimon, because of that 6th June, Donald Trump has sued him for debanking him. So there's a fight going on between the White House and the Wall Street as well.
No, the US may do it again, like I said, for northward movement. What happens to southward?
Exactly. I'm talking about the southward movement, Sony. So all that
the
movement.
US is not going to bother with southward. If at all it bothers, it will be northward.
Yeah, true. So the point over here is just one perception and the traffic at Bab al Mandeb could be blocked. One perception, traffic at Hormuz was blocked. So it is all about who's weaponizing this, who's trying to do this. What is the, it's a brilliant question. Is it not a fact that the Houthis were striking 2 years back also? They were. So many tankers were struck, if you all remember. But did the premium spike? No. Why did they not spike then?
Because it was not a collective hit. It's a collective hit today.
Yes, it's a collective.
It is a proper conflict theater. That was not the case then.
Yes, exactly. And over and above, this time the Iranians are basically, directing the show at even on the Yemeni coast as well. So this is about, for my listeners, I will say, go and read more on Lloyd's of London and you'll understand more on that. We've discussed a lot later. Now let's come to what is going to be the impact on Europe, Russia, and and all NATO. So today we saw Italy saying you cannot base in me, put base in my area. Then you had France saying you cannot use my airspace, because France was trying to broker a deal in Lebanon, which failed. The Israelis failed to honor that deal. And they bombed Beirut and some in the embassy area, near the embassy area as well, which made the French livid. You were not even listening to us. Very interestingly, there is a UN peacekeeping force in Lebanon, of which an Indian soldier was also probably injured in the Israeli bombing today. I don't know exactly whether he's injured or not. Maybe people can verify it. If I'm wrong, so maybe it could be possible I'm wrong. But that task force was led by an Italian. So the Israeli IDF virtually showed guns to that IDF general, that Italian general who was heading the UN force in Lebanon today. And that is where Italy came into being. Sorry, boss, we are not going to allow you any landing rights in Italy. Go on your own. So you see the countries, the outlandish. We saw the Syrian crew being mishandled. We saw a Russian journalist, RT journalist, on whose back just a missile was struck. Shrapnel went into him. Thankfully, he survived. And the Kremlin summoned the Israeli envoy to Kremlin. Ministry of Foreign Affairs summoned the Israeli envoy. What the hell are you up to? And then you had the Israeli Air Force trying to bomb Bushehr nuclear plant, projectiles just next to it, where it could be a nuclear radiation leak, which could turn Abu Dhabi and Dubai into a radioactive waste, and also poison the waters of Persian Gulf through which desalination plants operate. Are you serious? Do you want to create? So these are the developments, which is why you see the countries in Europe who are now even talking of, they never talked sense in Ukraine because that was their backyard. But anyway, in Iran, they're talking some sense over here. Okay, but even here, which is why they have taken a stand. We cannot continue with this insanity. What is going on? There are limits to what you can bomb and what you cannot bomb. Even if President Trump wants to get an off ramp and get out of this mess, the Israelis are not allowing it. You bomb South Park, you bomb their energy stations, you bomb power stations in Tehran, you will bomb their water dams. What the hell are you up to? Do you want to create a Middle Eastern catastrophe? And India, you would know how dearly these countries depend, the Gulf countries depend upon Gulf salination plants.
Yeah.
They'll go. I was reading today the statistic. The UAE only has water reserve for 45 days. That's it.
I mean, water has always been more expensive than oil there.
Correct.
Not now.
And as per a US data, what I read, if the desalination plant in Saudi Arabia the Riyadh will have to be evacuated within 7 days. That's how dire the situation is going to be.
No, I mean Israel. I mean, no one doubts, false flags. In fact, I believe Iran put out a statement and they said that we were not the ones that bombed the desalination plant of GCC. They said that was a false flag. Don't know. Anything is possible.
Everything is possible. We've seen the Levon affair. We've seen the USS Liberty. We've seen missiles fly over Turkey, Azerbaijan. Then we got to hear that the secret base in Georgia, which they are using to bomb and create false flags. We didn't even hit Aramco.
No, I mean,
Anyway,
we've seen them weaponize water during Gaddafi, right?
yep,
We've seen them do that. So
nothing new about it.
I mean, let's just say that when the campaign doesn't go on the lines of what they expected, they obviously will open up new fronts because everybody is here to achieve their objective, and
Yeah.
Israel is not going to let them back off.
Exactly. So when today President Trump in the evening tweeted, the Strait of Hormuz ko main zarurat nahi hai, ye nahi hai. Immediately Axios reported Bibi Netanyahu has released a statement. No, Strait of Hormuz to kholna hi padega. Ye to pura hi karna padega.
But it was always open.
Yeah, it was never closed. It was you, like a bumbling idiot, who went inside, stung a honey bee filled hornet's nest, and then say, lag gayi, गाँव वालों, आके बचाओ मुझे, ठीक है? This is absolutely crazy what has happened. So you see, what do you see? I believe in NATO, there's going to be a huge change.
I think we're going to start seeing militarization of countries. Countries in Europe have realized that whatever they tried to move away from fossil fuels and embrace that green energy and all of that, they lost out. That was actually the start. They lost out there, and then after that, Ukraine and America forced them to move away from Russia. So they emerged as the biggest losers. Today, seeing how badly countries that were allied have been getting impacted, they are realizing that we are on our own. President Trump has also made it very, very clear that post this war, he's going to reevaluate how he looks at NATO, and he's anyway expecting NATO to do more. So I believe Germany has begun industrializing, France has begun industrializing. If we're going to look at history and how history always repeats, I will not be surprised if Japan begins
Remilitarizing, correct.
Yes.
True. So these three countries.
Yeah, go on. No, go on.
Okay. So these three countries are going to play a huge role, and I believe even more so that for if Europe is going to face another dilemma, one is the energy problem, the other is going to be they will have to cut the social welfare budgets because they will have to focus on remilitarization. Where will they get the money from amid spiking inflations? And third, the fourth problem is they will need to, say make bread with Russia, and also they will need to understand their demographic problem, which is going to erupt because a lot of these countries have been infiltrated by those people coming from Syria and from Afghanistan, mainly Syria and the Middle East, due to those refugee crisis, which Mama Merkel, embraced so heavily.
Yeah, that is
And
a problem for a later day. But I mean, immediately, obviously, they're going to have to worry about their energy security and their defense. Their
exactly.
allocation of resources is going to change. And this is where the refugees will play the bigger role, because suddenly their welfare is going to get impacted in two ways. Because the welfare is A, for the citizens, and B, for the refugee programs. So both these two are going to get impacted.
And that is where you will see nationalist movement like AFD, which today in Germany said, America, you need to kick out American troops from Germany. Very
No, because
interesting.
Europe went so far left that sometimes the opposite of extreme left is only extreme right. That is
Exactly.
what you are going to see. The other thing that I think with India showcasing its military prowess in Operation Sindoor, which in many ways has also been a case study, and in which we have been able to address certain technological superiority of the US military industrial complex, will not be surprising if in the near future we are selling weapons to a lot of these countries that are part of the conflict currently.
And that brings me to the penultimate part of our, my interaction with you, and then we open up for other people who are waiting up. Okay. Uh, how do you believe India's options in changing geopolitical environment? What are the lessons for India? In my sense, there are many few lessons. One, the low cost hybrid warfare of drone warfare. I guess, and I believe the government of India has given approvals for these kind of drones to be built in mass quantity, and those are stealth drones. I think Sheshnak, if I don't recollect properly. And then also another thing which we need to understand, the Iranians have built cities, or in those mountains of granite, or virtually 1,500 feet below. So even a bunker buster cannot get there. They have tunnels. And if, let's say, the Americans see enriched uranium moving left to right, right to left, and they send in a bomber. By the time the bomber arrives in, let's say, few hours, that uranium would have moved 100, 200 kilometers inside a tunnel, because there are roads, there are virtually mini cities built inside. And this is something which India should consider building on its Himalayan borders, in Leh Plateau and everyone, because that is where you get the surprise element in, when you have to fight a two-front war, or you may have to fight the Chinese at a later date. Anyway, Siddharth, you want to speak on it? Sid, please go ahead.
नहीं, मैं एक पॉइंट ऐड करना चाह रहा था इसके अंदर. आपने न्यूक्लियर वाली बात बोली ना, माउंटेन वाली. आज एक फोटो सैटेलाइट इमेजरी आई है, क्या बोलते हैं, विच इज ऑफ अराउंड, जो लास्ट आपकी 12 दिन वाली वॉर हुई थी ना, उसकी ईशाफान का जो न्यूक्लियर एक तरह से फैसिलिटी है, वहां के एंट्रेंस टनल के बाहर में देयर इज अ 38 कंटेनर ट्रक. मतलब एक पर्टिकुलर ट्रक के अंदर 38 कंटेनर्स हैं, विच इज बीइंग अज्यूम्ड एज अ, वो आपका 450 किलो का जो एनरिच्ड मटेरियल है, उसको ट्रांसपोर्टेशन करने के लिए. अब ये याद होगा कि वो जो पिछला जो स्ट्राइक हुआ था 6 महीने पहले, आपका 8 महीने पहले, क्या बोलते हैं, आपका न्यूक्लियर वाला, उसमें इशाफान पे अटैक नहीं हुए थे, उस पे नतान्ज और फर्दो पे अटैक हुए थे. और अब ये इमेजरी आ रही है कि वो अटैक जो है वो ईरान ने पहले ही भांप लिया था, और इस वजह से उन्होंने अपना न्यूक्लियर जितना भी एनरिच मटेरियल है, वो 400 to 450 केजीज, वो इशाफान में ट्रांसपोर्ट कर दिया था. और इसीलिए इस वॉर में आप देखो, नतान्ज और फर्दो पे जितने अटैक्स नहीं हुए हैं, वो इस बार इशाफान के ऊपर में सबसे ज्यादा हमले हुए हैं. इसराइल ने 3 बार टारगेट किया है, और यूएस ने अभी तक उसको 2 बार टारगेट किया है. बट अभी भी आइए, हाँ
बोल, कंप्लीट कर.
मैं बस ये बताया था कि जो ईशाफान का जो कंस्ट्रक्शन है, ईशाफान इज मच मोर डीपर अंडरग्राउंड इन कंपैरिजन टू नतान्ज एंड फर्दो. तो जो र्यूमर्स आ रही हैं, वो क्या बोलते हैं आपका इसके अंदर में, कि द न्यूक्लियर एनरिच्ड मटेरियल इज स्टिल इन द हैंड्स ऑफ ईरान. और अगर ईरान चाहे, मतलब इफ इट मेक्स अप इट माइंड कि हमें न्यूक्लियर बनाना है, तो इट कुड जस्ट टेक देम 10 to 15 days टू गेट दैट टू 60% to 90.
5 problems, 1 solution, right, Himja?
अच्छा, they are also getting an advanced centrifuges. अब ये सबसे बड़ा इंटरेस्टिंग है कि कौन प्रोवाइड कर रहा है.
Anyways, Himja, 5 problems, 1 solution.
Correct.
We used to discuss this. Anyways, so the point is, ये अगर आपका न्यूक्लियर एनरिच मटेरियल 1500 फीट नीचे आपने आप घुमा रहे हो टनल्स के अंदर, आप कहाँ मारोगे? बंकर बस्तर 200 फीट 300 फीट पे जाके बंद हो जाएगा ना भाई, तुम्हारा जो बड़ा वाला बॉम्ब है. So you are trapped, and which is why Donald Trump today said it is very difficult to get the nuclear enriched from Iran, from inside Iran. तो क्या, ये तो I need to understand this.
वो पहले खुद दे रहा था यार डिप्लोमेसी से ओमान में, जेनेवा में.
Exactly. Again, you believe वो रशिया ने, पुतिन ने यहाँ तक ऑफर किया कि I will take the enriched uranium to Moscow. You get a deal, and the Washington refused it.
वो ट्रम्प भिखारी को दिख गया कि फ्री में माल मिल रहा है 450 kg, इसलिए रिजेक्ट कर दिया उसने.
That's a good one. So the point is, ना regime change हुआ, खमाइनी replace by खमाइनी, IRGC full in control, तुम्हारे सारे बेसेस उड़ गए वो अलग, तुम्हारी हॉर्मूज का कंट्रोल जो खुला था वो बंद हो गया, उसमें भी तुम लोगों को बोला जा रहा है कि तुम्हारी औकात नहीं है, अमेरिका को सैंक्शन कर दिया गया है, तुमने ईरानियन ऑयल पे सैंक्शन हटा दिए, तुम उनका एनरिच यूरेनियम नहीं ले पाए हो, तुम उनकी मिसाइल
IRGC with more hardliners,
तुम उनके मिसाइल सिस्टम्स को और उनके ड्रोन सिस्टम को अभी तक खत्म नहीं कर पाए. तुमने वॉर के 3rd डे पे बोला था कि उनका 90% तो हमने उड़ा दिया, और आज हम 5th वीक में चल रहे हैं और अभी भी कैपेबिलिटी रख रहे हैं मारने की.
नहीं, पर उनके हिसाब से तो रेजिम चेंज हो गया ना.
हाँ, और खमैनी रिप्लेस विद खमैनी हो तो गया.
Exactly. So you may have achieved the military dominance, the military objective, but strategically you failed. It's as simple as that. So far you have failed. Your strategic objectives are absolutely, if there is one line, you may have won the military battle, but you have lost the strategic war. Because the whole purpose, if a world's largest navy cannot go into it in open Hormuz, because 270 degrees पे वो पहाड़ से जब वो मारेंगे खिंच के, कभी ड्रोन, कभी मरीन्स, कभी माइंस, और कभी उनके वो हिमजा, if you would remember World War II में Japanese ने suicide pilots थे, you remember? They used to suicide kamikaze planes. The Iranians have trained thousands of kamikaze divers to go to swim, go to the ship and blast. Even if they finish, don't even send their population in. शहादत तो खून में है, कितना रखोगे भाई?
Imagine अगर वो मतलब अपने क्या बोलते हैं रिलीजियस लीडर के लिए अपने आप को खुद इतना चोट पहुंचा सकते हैं ड्यूरिंग मुहर्रम, देन इमेजिन वो अपने दुश्मन को कितना चोट पहुंचा सकते हैं, अपने आप को कितना चोट पहुंचा सकते हैं फॉर टू फाइट अगेंस्ट इट्स एनिमी.
यार उनके लिए एग्जिस्टेंशियल बैटल है.
हाँ, दे हैव नथिंग टू लूज. Technically, the regime population, the regime supporters and the regime population, regime supporters and the regime itself, they have nothing to lose. उनको समझ में आ चुका है कि अगर हम थोड़ा सा भी कंसेशन दे देंगे मिलिटरीली, ये हमें मार देंगे. तो भाई जब हमें मरना ही है तो फिर हम 4 को मार के मरेंगे.
Exactly. ऐसे सिचुएशन में, now let's assume you go into Hormuz, you park your marines at an island, Kisham Island, Kharg Island. What if the Iranians bomb Kharg Island? तो अब तुम्हारे हाथ से चला ही गया, मार ही दो. Marines मरे सो अलग, ऑयल इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर मरा सो अलग, यानी the oil goes up to $130-140. Okay, let's say this was Kharg. Let's say उसके बाद वो Kharg is only 12 kilometers from the Iranian shoreline, so you can just imagine how difficult it would be to control, and a 1400-kilometer shoreline. Very well done, Americans. Similarly, you go to Kisham Island, or you go to Larak Island, which is next to Hormuz, and you take the UAE help and do all. What stops IRGC from invading UAE? The UAE of any army, number one. Number two, what happens if you stand on those islands, you watch, and there are mountains behind them, ठीक है, from 270-degree angle they are going to hit at you from all sides. Will you be able to tolerate it? How many marines will you send inside? Will you be able to maintain it? And when the shooting war begins in the state, there will be no traffic flowing. अभी तो फिर भी traffic चल रहा है, shooting war में तो traffic भी नहीं चलेगा. And when 15 किलोमीटर के वाटरवे में जब शूटिंग वॉर चालू हो जाएगी तो ट्रैफिक नहीं चलेगा. ट्रैफिक नहीं चलेगा तो the state is totally blocked. It is going to lead to a global collapse. So even if you go in, you're going to face a problem. If you don't go in, you will end up turning Iran from an isolated pariah into a regional hegemon. This is what you have done strategically. It's a huge blunder that people are not talking about. So now they have deployed, the State Department has given a cable today, just now came out in the evening, to the US Embassy that you need to please up your propaganda machine and you need to hire local influencers in all, what you say,
social media platforms.
social media platforms. So, to basically, अपना propaganda फैलाओ. So this is exactly what has happened, and it is very interesting to see कि people confuse कि एक second, okay, yeah. So yeah, so it is very interesting to see that this thing has happened. ये पूरा का पूरा you go in, अच्छा, let's say you go in, आपने वहां पे 6 महीने, साल, 1.5 साल, 2 साल वहां पे उन आइलैंड्स पे बिताया, ठीक है, आप लड़ते गए, आपकी कैजुअलिटीज हुई, आपकी ग्लोबल इकोनॉमी टूटी, अल्टीमेटली यू विड्रॉ. Whatever is remains of the Shia militias or the regime or whatever, won't they try to reestablish the toll back or the control over the Hormuz back to square one? You could not defeat the Taliban because no amount of B2, B-52 can defeat a tribal entity called Taliban. You could not defeat the will of the Vietnamese people because they wanted to put you out. You could not defeat the Shia militias in Syria. They were the ones who fought as ground soldiers for the American military at one point of time, aligning with Iran at that time to take ISIS out, along with the Kurds. And at that time, you had Erdogan, you had Russia, you had Iran, and you had Assad working together to make sure that ISIS is defeated. And today, the same very ISIS and the same very Jabhat al-Nusra man is sitting in Damascus and he's being welcomed in Western capital in suit and tie. I mean, you people talk about Iran as a state sponsor of terrorism. I saw a few analysts on YouTube and few analysts going on, oh, ये तो terror sponsoring regime है. वो सीरिया की कौन सी रिजीम चल रही है, बहुत अच्छी है. वहां पे तो उसको तो बोला जा रहा है कि मेरा साथ दो. अच्छा, वो ठीक है. तालिबान ठीक है, वो बात अलग है. तालिबान में क्या होता है, ह्यूमन राइट्स है वहां पे या वुमेन राइट्स है. So even though those rights are not even there today, but yet we Republic of India is dealing with Taliban for a strategic purposes. So there are no good and bads. Please don't preach your morality onto it. I agree that no sovereign nation can be born, but at the same time, this is probably a military invention. I can fly over Tehran. हाँ, नीचे उतर के दिखा. तो मैं भी बोल दूं, मेरा हेलीकॉप्टर भी उड़ जाएगा तेहरान के ऊपर, कोई डिफेंस तो है ही नहीं कुछ भी. नीचे जमीन पर उतर के दिखा, उतर उन पहाड़ियों में, उतर उन हॉर्मुज स्ट्रेट में, यू विल अंडरस्टैंड तुम्हारा क्या हाल होगा. So I believe moreover, this war is going to lead to supply chain disruption. This war is going to have first hand, second hand, third hand, tertiary effects. This is going to change the global order. This is combination of 73, 2008 and all these together, right? And I would want now for Himja to give her final comments on this before we can open the space, and in case she wishes to stay, she can. Otherwise, we'll have some questions.
मेरे को तो दिख नहीं रही है हिमजा मैम.
आ गई है, she's here.
No. I don't think any closing remarks. I think we've covered enough.
Yeah, ठीक है.
अच्छा, एक बात मैं ऐड करना चाहूंगा, जो हिमजा मैम ने एक्चुअली हार्डलाइनर्स वाली बात बोली थी. हार्डलाइनर्स IRGC में आज नहीं आए थे, मतलब इस वॉर के कारण नहीं बने. ये 2020 में ही बन गए थे जब आपने एक स्टेट्समैन को मारा था, विच वॉज कासिम सुलेमानी.
Soleimani, yeah.
Soleimani was a statesman before a military man, and he was one of those guys who actually deployed the largest proxy force against the ISIS. एंड वो मीटिंग बकायदा सबको पता ही है कि पर्सनली बीबी जी गए थे व्हाइट हाउस के अंदर में और जाके बोला था कि इसको मारना बहुत जरूरी है करके, एंड ही वाज स्ट्रक इन इराक राइट आफ्टर ही केम आउट ऑफ द एयरपोर्ट. आपने उसको मार दिया, यू क्रिएटेड अ पावर वैक्यूम, और आपने फिर उनको अलाउ, एक तरह से टेक्निकली यू क्रिएटेड अ वैक्यूम जहां पे उस आईआरजीसी हार्डलाइनर्स जो एक तरह से कासिम सुलेमानी के अम्ब्रेला के अंदर आ रहे थे एंड दे वर नॉट बीइंग एबल टू प्रोजेक्ट देयर पावर, आपने उनको अलाउ कर दिया कि आप आके पास सीट ऑफ पावर्स ऑक्यूपाई कर लो, और
Yeah,
आपको
but they
अक्टूबर
also
7 मिल गया.
वो उनसे सीखे, right? Because now what have they done? They clearly said when another leader who was actually in charge of the mediation, when he was assassinated during the course of this war, what did they say? That we have learnt, we have an entire hierarchy in place. So even if you take one out, you take two out, you take three out, we have the next person who has been appointed. He will take over. And they are all equally indoctrinated. They are all part of, like you said, the Soleimani umbrella, and they are all hardlined. And they are all young, which means A, they are not going away. The Ayatollah was old, he was ailing, he was a titular figure. Usko nikal ke, they literally kicked a hornet's nest.
Absolutely. So, so it, हाँ बोल सकते, complete
नहीं,
yourself.
एक खमैनी वॉज एक्चुअली अ प्लग, मतलब वो एक ऐसा कॉर्क था जो आपने आपकी एक तरह से जो इस्लामिक रेडिकलिज्म थी ईरान की रिजीम के अंदर में, कहीं ना कहीं वो एक प्लग था जो उसको रोक के रख रहा था. नहीं तो आपको जैसे सबको पता है हिस्ट्री के बारे में कि 2003 2004 के आसपास में एक वर्बल चला गया था कि द पोजेशन न्यूक्लियर वेपन्स इज हराम इन इस्लाम, और उसके बाद से ही क्या बोलते हैं, द प्रोग्राम वाज लिमिटेड टू द एनरिचमेंट इटसेल्फ एंड नॉट द वेपन्स प्रोग्राम.
Yeah.
वरना जब नॉर्थ कोरिया जैसी कंट्री एक्वायर कर सकती है, जब पाकिस्तान जैसी कंट्री एक्वायर कर सकती है, तो ईरान वाज मच मोर स्टेबल एंड मच मोर क्या बोलते हैं प्रोफिशिएंट इन द सेंस कि उनके पास तो लीडर्स थे. 70% ऑफ द पीपल इन ईरान आर एक्चुअली स्टेम ग्रेजुएट्स.
Not only
वो क्यों नहीं कर पाते?
not only do they have the lead, not only उनके पास leaders थे, capability थी, but Iranian, they are, उनकी जो capabilities है in various sectors, they are among the top 5 or the top 10. ये चीज लोग बात नहीं करते, but ये fact है, and they have managed to get there despite everything.
Despite the heavy sanctioning and all that stuff, a failed banking, a failed currency, science and STEM graduates, mein, they actually do very well. And you are bombing those universities and everything. But final remark of mine, or I wish to close with a thought. I think the world had, there are few some leaders in world have lost their sanities, and they're behaving as if they've turned many of them as weaponized religion. Many of them have used cults. Some are even using messianic prophecies, indoctrinating troops. We have to get this done. We have to get this done. If this is done, if the army of Persia will, if these army attacks, a Messiah will come. A Messiah will come. The Antichrist will come. I don't know what in 21st century when we should be talking about development of mankind and humankind. As together with technology and betterment of people, you want to take people back to those messianic ages, literally. Now, I don't know whether these theologies are real. I have no idea to confirm. I've read about it. It's part of their, their dictum. But this is one part of it, and the other part of it is, the geopolitical aim which are masked behind this. Like they use these theologies and these things to mask their geopolitical aim. What is Israel's primary aim? Israel's primary aim in this war is to destroy the state of Iran, trifurcate it, tribalism, whatever X, Y, Z, and then become the regional hegemon virtually, and in the midst, the GCC countries are also taken down in a mutually attritionist war, and that makes Israel all pervasive, powerful, and dominant, because America will always provide the money to rebuild Israel, which the GCC will not have, because Israel happens to be the favorite child of America in the Middle East, the permanent aircraft carrier. The second, why are Americans in for it? Americans are in for it because they wanted to uproot the toll, the petrodollar, the China 40-year, the 25-year, $400 billion agreement of the BRI and the petro-yuan trade. Because Russia, Iran, and China were the part of the resistance as part of the BRICS club. Venezuela was also part of the club, which was taken out by taking out President Maduro. But where has America achieved that purpose today? Is the regime gone? No. Today, Iran is dominant. It controls 20% of the world's trade. Hormuz. It can hit tankers at will. You have to seek permission. My बाप जाएं कि नहीं जाएं कश्मीर और लद्दाख आइलैंड के बीच में. Your navies will suffer. US Navy will suffer enormous casualties if they try to go inside. And over and above that, if you don't go, it will be a perfect Suez moment for you, just like Britain dwindled. And people will laugh on you. The world's biggest navy, the world's biggest empire could not get Hormuz opened. Either way, you're trapped. And you have turned an adversary, your biggest nemesis, into a strategic player in the region. If this is the strategy, hats off to Donald Trump and America. And the consequences of financial market, the tech bubble, which we talked about, will continue to flow. I think this was a very illuminating discussion with all of you. Thank you, Sid. Thank you, Himja, for joining us today, and Mango as well for your question. Okay, it's already 2 hours. हमने 1 घंटा plan किया था, so I do not have the bandwidth to continue. हाँ बोल.
एक पॉइंट मैं ऐड करता हूँ. अभी रिसेंट डेवलपमेंट हुई है. एक मिडिल ईस्ट कंट्री है जो अपने आप को यूनाइटेड स्टेट्स ऑफ अमेरिका समझ रही थी, एंड फिर उसके ऊपर 8 ड्रोन्स आए, एंड देन दे रियलाइज दे आर यूनाइटेड अरब एमिरेट्स, और अब वो पुतिन से फोन पे बात कर रहे हैं. द स्मॉलेस्ट एंड द मोस्ट पावरफुल नेवी ऑफ द वर्ल्ड.
Oh my God. UAE. Himja, you remember I told you this thing very fact, that if they have to get a solution to Iran, the road to Iran is not via Turkey, it is not
To
via
Russia.
Istanbul, it is not via Islamabad. The road to Iran, Tehran, goes via Moscow.
All
You
right.
get Moscow on table for Ukraine, and you will get Iran. You will get a solution on off-ramp escalation. If you keep hitting Russia by drones and keep presenting Zelensky to the sheikhs in Middle East, I'm sorry, Donald Trump, that strategy is not going to work. It's going to backfire.
मैं तो मोहम्मद बिन जायद की किस्मत पे सोच रहा हूँ कि कल को जैसे ये जंग खत्म होती है और पीस आ भी जाता है, चलो 1 महीने 2 महीने जो भी, उसका क्या हाल होगा? क्योंकि दुबई की इकोनॉमी या यूएई की इकोनॉमी में 14 से 22% का हिट आने वाला है. एक्सपेक्टेड है कि 14% तो ऑलरेडी हिट कर रहा है, बट अगर एक्सटेंड किया तो 22%. इधर से ईरान वालों ने जितना मारना था वो मार दिया, उधर से सऊदी भी अगेंस्ट है टेक्निकली, तो कल को उसको पीस टाइम मिलेगा तो वो भी इसके पीछे आने वाला है. तो यूएई जाएगा कहाँ पे फिर? बाकी तो अपना देख लेंगे.
इसराइल के पास भाई आका बचाओ. अब्राहम अकॉर्ड किसने साइन करे थे? बहुत भारी पड़े. अब्राहम अकॉर्ड साइन कर रहा है उसको. ठीक है. So very interesting, very illuminating discussion. Thank you, Smango. Thank you, Himja. Thank you, Sid. And let's, hopefully we'll catch up once again. I'm sorry, everyone. So many people kept on waiting today, but I wanted to have a limited panel and, a thorough discussion on things. Recording इसकी रहेगी, जिसको सुनना हो सुनना ना. Hopefully I'll put it on my platform as well.
We need to have Himja more often in our spaces.
हाँ, उसको टाइम मिलेगा तो वो आएगी पक्का. I'll try and get her again if possible.
But मेरे को एक क्वेश्चन पूछना था उनसे, but probably I think I ask next time.
ठीक है. चल, done रहा. Thank you, Inja. Thank you so much for coming.
It was good to be here.
Yeah, great, everyone. Good night, everyone. Take care. Ciao, bye.